Okay, let's dive in. We've got some really thought-provoking stuff today.
Yeah, definitely. A summary of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, and some images that, well, they really hit home.
They do. So our mission here is to unpack this, get into the core argument he's making about digital tech and, its potential impact on young people's mental health,
And right off the bat, the source material makes this pretty stark observation.
which is,
Well, it points to this noticeable downward trend in youth mental health, a concerning one. And crucially, it suggests this decline really seems to kick in around 2010.
2010. Okay, that year rings a bell in this context.
Exactly, 2010. That's the year the sources pinpoint as kind of the moment smartphones and social media became really central to childhood, right? Widespread adoption.
So not just a coincidence in Haidt's view.
No, it's presented as potentially pivotal, a major shift away from what he calls a play-based childhood, the historical norm, towards a phone-based one.
And this fundamental shift is what Haidt calls the Great Rewiring.
That's the term, yeah. The sources describe it as really the defining thing for Generation Z kids born roughly mid-90s, 2010.
Right.
I mean, think about it. Unlike millennials, who kind of remember a time before the internet was
Yeah,
everywhere.
I definitely do.
Gen Z grew up with it. Constant connection was just normal. Their whole social world, their development, it's all tangled up with the online world in a way that's completely new.
But the sources also hint this wasn't like an overnight switch in 2010. It was building up.
That's a really key point the summary makes. Yes. 2010 is like the flashpoint, but the source suggests the groundwork, the sort of pre-wiring maybe, started way back in the 80s.
How so?
Changing ideas about safety, stranger danger, more traffic on the roads. Parents started, understandably, restricting kids' independence more.
Less roaming around the neighborhood unsupervised.
Exactly. Less
Yeah.
outdoor play, less freedom. So that historical play-based model was already shrinking even before smartphones really took over.
Okay, so let's dig into that contrast. This historical, play-based childhood versus the phone-based one the sources talk about.
Yeah.
What did that older model involve?
Well, historically, and honestly, this applies across most mammals, kids learn through play. It's just fundamental.
Right.
Exploring, interacting with other kids without an adult always directing things, taking little risks, physical ones, social ones. The sources really stress this is how you learn social cues, build confidence, figure things out, become resilient. It's been the default for, well, ages.
But that started changing in the 80s, like you said.
Yeah, eroding because of those safety fears.
Yeah.
Maybe overblown, maybe not, but they had an effect. And then, bam, 2010. The smartphone arrives in everyone's pocket.
And that's when the decline accelerates into this phone-based childhood.
That's how the sources frame it. Yeah, it transforms things rapidly.
And phone-based, we should be clear, the source isn't just talking about the phone itself.
No, absolutely. The summary clarifies that. Phone-based is sort of shorthand. It covers smartphones, sure, but also gaming consoles, laptops, tablets, basically any device giving you access to the internet and that digital world.
So the core idea is that play and hanging out just moved indoors, online.
A huge chunk of it did, yeah. Instead of the park or the street, it's happening through screens on these digital platforms.
The book summary uses this analogy. It's pretty stark. The life on Mars idea.
Yeah, it's meant to be jarring, I think, but it makes a point.
What's the comparison?
It basically asks you to imagine signing your 10-year-old up for an unsupervised life on Mars, a totally different environment, unknown risks, and you, the parent, have almost zero ability to see what's happening or intervene.
Okay.
And the analogy is that's kind of what happens when kids get smartphones and social media accounts, often just by clicking, I am 13. They enter these huge, complex, largely unmonitored digital spaces.
So while we've maybe hyper-focused on physical safety,
Right, we've maybe neglected the potential harms of this completely new virtual environment they're navigating, often alone.
and according to the source material, this massive shift, this phone-based life,
Yeah.
it leads to specific harms. Haid outlines 4 main ones.
Exactly. This is the core of the argument linking the shift to the mental health issues. The first harm is social deprivation.
Which sounds weird, right?
Yeah.
Social media.
It does. It's counterintuitive. But the point the source makes is that it's not the right kind of real social learning, picking up nonverbal cues, navigating tricky face-to-face moments, building deep trust that happens in person. The source argues having, thousands of online friends just isn't the same developmentally as having a few close real-life friends you actually interact with.
That makes sense. All the nuances you miss online. Okay, what's the second harm?
Sleep deprivation. And this one, well, we hear a lot about this now, don't we?
We do. Devices in the bedroom.
Exactly. The blue light messes with melatonin, tells your brain stay awake. And kids, especially teenagers, they need so much sleep. The sources are clear. Chronic lack of sleep is just incredibly damaging for their mental and physical health.
Okay. Social deprivation, sleep deprivation. What's number 3? This one feels very 2024.
Attention fragmentation.
No.
Yeah, the source nails this, I think. It's not just the notifications actually popping up.
Yeah.
It's the knowledge that a notification could pop up at any second. It keeps your brain in this state of, like, constant readiness for distraction, always scanning.
So you can't really sink into deep focus.
Exactly. Makes learning hard, makes concentrating for any length of time really difficult for young people growing up with this.
Wow. Okay, so even if the phone's technically off or silent, its presence is disruptive. And the fourth harm.
Addiction. Plain and simple. The sources state pretty directly that this tech, for many young people, is highly addictive.
How so? Does it explain the mechanism?
The summary doesn't go deep into the, dopamine loops or algorithms specifically, but it points to the patterns, the dependence, the distress when the tech is taken away. It looks and acts like addiction.
Right. And the source also mentions something interesting, that these harms don't hit everyone the same way. There are gender differences.
Yes, that's a really important distinction the summary pulls out. This great rewiring seems to play out differently for girls and boys.
Okay. How does it affect girls, according to Haidt?
For girls, the sources suggest social media is often the bigger issue. It might draw them in promising connection, but the argument is it often ends up eroding self-esteem. Constant comparison, perfectly curated lives, sometimes cyberbullying.
Yeah, that curated reality trap. And for boys?
For boys, the source points more towards video games and also online pornography.
How does that manifest differently?
Well, these platforms can allow boys to sort of completely retreat from the real social world. In the past, if a kid was alone and bored, eventually boredom would push them back out to find something to do, someone to interact with. But now, there's endless entertainment available. It provides this sort of false companionship, the source calls it, and lets boys avoid the messy, challenging, but necessary parts of real-world social interaction.
Okay, so we have this diagnosis. The rewiring, the shift from play to phone, these 4 harms, different impacts. What's the proposed solution then? The summary outlines a call to action, right?
It does, and it's pretty sweeping. It targets different groups, governments, tech companies, schools, parents.
And the core idea behind the solutions.
It's quite provocative, actually. The underlying philosophy is that kids need less protection in the real world. Less helicopter parenting, less shielding from minor risks. And conversely, they need more protection in the virtual world.
That definitely flips the script on a lot of modern parenting trends.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the concrete steps suggested in the source material?
Well, the summary lists several key actions. First, and this is probably the most controversial one, restrict access to social media. The proposal outlined is basically no smartphones before high school and no social media accounts before age 16.
16. Wow. And the reasoning?
The idea, according to the source, is that those tween and early teen years are absolutely crucial for developing real-world social skills and bonds. Trying to do that through the kind of distorted mirror of social media is harmful. Let them build that foundation in person first.
Okay. It makes sense from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What about schools?
Second big point, schools need to be phone-free. Completely.
Not just put them away during class.
No, the argument is the mere presence of the phone, even in a pocket or bag, is a constant distraction. As we talked about with attention fragmentation, schools should be zones for focus, for interaction between students and teachers, not screens.
Right. Okay. And the third step loops back to that earlier idea.
Absolutely. It loops back to play and independence. Third, allow more unsupervised play and independence.
So actively encourage kids to get outside, climb trees.
Pretty much. Encourage outdoor time, sports, letting them explore the neighborhood, figure things out with their peers without an adult constantly mediating or supervising every tiny thing.
And the thinking there is?
The book argues that dealing with small, real-world risks, physical bumps and bruises, social disagreements, is how kids learn competence. How they learn to solve problems, manage themselves, and build genuine resilience for life. You can't get that if you're wrapped in cotton wool, either physically or digitally.
So if we're boiling all this down from the sources, what's the single most important takeaway message here?
I think the absolute core message is that this decline we're seeing in youth mental health isn't happening in a vacuum. It's deeply connected to this huge shift towards a phone-based childhood.
driven by less real-world freedom and more virtual-world immersion.
Exactly. And the sources argue that turning this around isn't going to happen passively. It requires deliberate, active changes, primarily delaying that early, intense immersion in the digital world, and at the same time, consciously rebuilding opportunities for kids to have real-world independence, real play, real social connection.
It really presents a powerful case. It suggests that maybe our focus on maximizing physical safety might have kind of inadvertently opened up these new significant psychological vulnerabilities.
Which leads to a really interesting question for you, the listener, to think about based on all this.
Go on.
Considering this history, the decline of unsupervised play coinciding with the rise of constant digital connection, how might we need to rethink what a safe childhood actually means today? Is safety just about preventing accidents, or does it now have to fundamentally include building psychological resilience? And does that mean maybe redefining the balance, allowing more freedom and managed risk in the real world while putting stronger guardrails around the virtual one? Something to really chew on.